Disney acquired Star Wars back in 2012, and since then it's been a roller coaster of emotions. Some would say that Disney ruined Star Wars, some would say they've given us some of the best Star Wars media of all time, but what if I told you both could be somewhat true? What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and welcome back to another video. So today I've got a tier list ranking of the Disney Star Wars projects. This consists of the sequel trilogy as well as some standalone movies, in addition to all the live-action Disney Plus shows we've got, and a batch of animated shows as well. Disney Star Wars has been quite divisive, so we're gonna have fun with this one. Of course, the most recent Star Wars project that inspired this video is Skeleton Crew, now streaming on Disney Plus. But before I get into this ranking, be sure to hit that like button, comment down below your ranking of the Disney-era Star Wars projects, and of course, subscribe and hit that notification bell to help reach my goal of 150,000 subscribers here on the channel. Without further ado, let's dive in. So the tiers I have are S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier, and F tier, just your standard tiers. And again, these are just Star Wars projects that have released since Disney acquired Lucasfilm and Star Wars back in 2012. Randomized, as always, and the first one is Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. It came out in 2016. It was a year after The Force Awakens, and I want to say this is a $1 billion club film. If not, it's just shy of joining the $1 billion club. I'm going to put Rogue One in B tier. It's a movie that has really high highs, specifically like the Vader scene at the end. That, and then the final 10 minutes that follow are like the best part of the film. But the entire build-up, it can be hard to get on board because there are so many characters in this crew that it's just impossible to give enough depth to all of them to fully buy in to the squad. Cassian Andor is kind of an outlier because he's got his own show now that's retroactively sort of adding a lot of depth to him. And as a movie, this functions to answer one of the biggest plot holes in all of Star Wars. Why does the Death Star have one fatal flaw, one obvious way to take it out and destroy it? It's got some intense moments. Obviously, like the third act is a straight up war movie. There are some street level Star Wars elements at play here, and Chirrut Imwe is one of the more fascinating characters, but it just isn't as great as I wish it was. Some people will say this is a top 3 Star Wars movie. Some people say it is the best Star Wars movie. I can't buy into that, but it was fresh and new, and I kind of wish they kept making standalone movies, but they pivoted to Disney Plus shows eventually. Next, we have Star Wars Rebels, which feels weird because it's like the first of these, technically. It started on Disney XD, which was like a cable network channel back in the day. I watched the first season, then I fell off it, and then I came back during the pandemic and watched the rest of it. And I'm going to say Star Wars Rebels through and through is probably A tier for me. And not there. There we go. A tier. Nope, not S tier. A tier. I can move a mouse pad, I swear. When it comes to Rebels, I think I dig this show because we have an entirely new group of characters here. It still brings in, Ahsoka, Darth Maul. We get Thrawn for the first time, but what I really cared about with this show was how there was this unconventional family feel. In Marvel terms, this is like Guardians of the Galaxy in many ways. You've got your unconventional family. It still tackles, Jedi lore, and you've got some great master and apprentice moments with like Kanan around. Specifically, I think Kanan might be the standout character and one of the best Jedi in all of Star Wars, frankly. But I just love the unconventional family feel of Rebels. Chopper is your lovable droid. You've got Zeb, who's kind of a goofball, and Kanan and Hera's relationship is the heart of it as well. Then Ezra's like the young gun, the Luke Skywalker of the group, and of course you've got Sabine, who's got some of the coolest armor around. So everyone has a compelling story here. They all have their various journeys they're on, and it's surprisingly well written. Now, the one downfall of this is it's probably the kiddiest Star Wars project, which is no shot at it. It's just like, it's even more kiddie than the Clone Wars. It came on Disney XD. I think it was like TVY7. Which is, for young kids. And so the first season specifically can kind of play out like Disney Junior at times. I think that's what it was called, which isn't a bad thing, but it does, take a while to kind of find its footing. It still turns into A-tier Star Wars by the end, though. Next, we have Tales of the Jedi. This was one season, then we got Tales of the Empire. I'm not talking about Tales of the Empire because I never actually watched it. So Tales of the Jedi, I enjoyed somewhat. I'll put it in C tier. There was some fascinating little shorts. I think it was comprised of like 6 episodes, each of them being like 13 minutes, and all of them detailed like a different little, story in Star Wars. A lot of it focused on Ahsoka's backstory. Some of it showed Dooku with a young Qui-Gon. That might have been the standout of the series to me. It wasn't really necessary to watch, in all honesty, but you get some cool little side backstories on characters, but that's really it at the end of the day. It's nothing Crazy. Next, we have Skeleton Crew, which just wrapped up. I'm going to put Skeleton Crew in B tier. I thought this was really solid and what Star Wars needed right now. I actually have a review that I'll link up above. But by the end, I was like, you know what? That was a fun adventure, and it went back to the basics. Sometimes that's what you got to do. And I made a sports comparison, like if you're playing basketball and you're on a cold streak, you've been missing a bunch of shots, sometimes you need a confidence layup. To me, I think Skeleton Crew's a confidence layup for Star Wars. It was an easy win, and it got them back on track. Now, I know the viewership was down, but in terms of just quality, they weren't trying to tackle these, concepts that challenge what we thought we knew about the Jedi. They're not introducing anything new about the Sith. It's just a fun space adventure with a group of kids. So it plays it safe, but it's wholesome family entertainment. So I'd say it's B tier. I enjoyed it on a week-to-week basis. It didn't blow me away, but that's not really what I was expecting at this point in time for Star Wars. So B tier, fun watch for Skeleton Crew. I recommend checking it out. All episodes are now streaming on Disney+. Next, we've got The Mandalorian, which has 3 seasons. And so when I talk about The Mandalorian, I have to weigh all 3 seasons. If it was just season 1 and season 2, I would put this at the top of S tier right now. I, however, have to include the 3rd season. And because of that, I will still go A tier. Season 3 was a big drop-off in quality. It felt directionless, and like Mando and Grogu weren't even the main characters of the season. There was a whole episode that they weren't even really in, I want to say, which was bizarre. Bo-Katan kind of took the spotlight, which is totally fine. She's a great character, but it's not really the Mandalorian at that point with Grogu. They kind of didn't have a reason to be around. I feel like their story's at an end, and somehow they're getting a movie, maybe a season 4, baffles me. I'm still going to go top of A tier with Mando because seasons 1 and 2 are highly rewatchable and so fresh at the time of their release for Star Wars. I fell in love with the character of Din Djarin, and to me, this is one of the more unique projects that Disney's put out under the Star Wars umbrella. Season 3 was a misstep, admittedly, but the first 2 seasons are so great, specifically the finale of season 2 with Luke Skywalker returning. I mean, there are so many moments that made me feel happy and hopeful inside, and it reminded me of when I watched that original trilogy for the first time as a kid. So it's got classic all-time Star Wars moments. It's going top of A tier. I can't go S tier though because of season 3, but if season 3 didn't exist, I would be putting that bad boy in S tier. Next, we've got The Rise of Skywalker. This movie is atrocious. I don't know who it was made for because fans of The Last Jedi hated it, and people who didn't even like The Last Jedi also hated it. I'm in that camp. It didn't please anybody. This was a movie that was just trying to save face at the last minute. It was like, oh, well, The Last Jedi really pretty much tore the fandom in half and forever changed Star Wars as we know it. So now let's just try and please everyone. But the movie was a disaster. I'm putting it in F tier. I think I gave this 2 or 2.5 stars back in 2019, and since then I've tried to watch this movie and I can't get through the first 5 minutes. The opening crawl is a joke. It lets you know, hey, don't take this movie seriously. Then you got just Palpatine returning in general is absolutely absurd. It feels the least Star Wars out of any of the Star Wars movies by far to me. I mean, this movie's a joke. I can't even stomach it. Multiple moments I just sat there and face-palmed like, oh, we're gonna wipe 3PO's memory forever. Just kidding. Oh, Chewbacca's dead? No, the movie just tries to fake you out. It treats the viewer like a toddler. I can't deal with this one. Talking about it right now, it's gonna go down a path I can't follow, if you feel me. So I'm going F tier with that, and we're moving on. Next, we have Obi-Wan Kenobi. Maybe the disappointment of the century. I mean, in the biggest bag fumble by Disney ever. How the hell was this not released in theaters? I've said this before since 2022. I will die on this hill, and I would love to talk about it in the comments. Friendly discussion. Please tell me why I'm wrong with this point I'm about to make. Why was this not a theatrical release? It should have been a 2 to 2.5 hour long movie. The first teaser could have been 30 to 45 seconds long. Could have shown shots of Obi-Wan in the desert. Maybe end with a lightsaber ignition, and then we hear Vader breathing and see him ignite his lightsaber. Obi-Wan and Vader coming face to face. Then we go boom, Kenobi. Drop the Obi-Wan, just call it Kenobi. A Star Wars story or Kenobi. That's $1 billion film because it would have been the first time we'd seen Hayden Christensen back as Anakin as well as Vader, and then you've got Ewan back since 2005. This came out in 2022. That's a 17-year gap. Golden opportunity, and Disney just pissed it away. I'll never forgive them for that. I won't. I was incredibly hyped for this. I want to say this was my most anticipated project of that year. Right neck and neck with Stranger Things 4. I was beyond excited for this, and we got a 6-episode series that for some reason focused on young Leia. We got Reva in here for some reason, an Inquisitor. It was all over the place. This should have been the easiest billion-dollar film Disney has ever made, and instead they decided to make a Disney Plus show that ended up being lifeless, with tons of just throwaway characters. It should have focused on Obi-Wan kind of being this outcast, this hermit, essentially, like we know him as in A New Hope, and then Vader becoming hell-bent on just tracking him down. All I needed was that. Vader, maybe one Inquisitor, and then Obi-Wan and whoever he encounters along his journey, but I didn't need young Leia. I didn't need any of that. It could have been so much better and more effective. I will say that final duel, it's cool, but forever I'm just going to view the last time they duel before New Hope as the duel on Mustafar, and so it hurts me deeply. I think, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, I will still go, like, C tier, maybe D tier. I don't know. Let me think about this. I think I have to go D tier. D for disappointment. It had so many golden opportunities and it just consistently missed, and I can't forgive it for that. So it probably rightfully should go in C tier, but the disappointment is so real that I gotta settle for D. Next we have The Force Awakens, which kickstarted the sequel trilogy, was really our intro to Disney Star Wars. I'm going A tier with this, and I'll put it right in the middle of A tier. This movie is still such a delightful blast of a movie. It, yes, feels very similar to A New Hope, but it kind of played it safe, which I don't blame it for. You know, we're in this new era of Star Wars. It had been 10 years since a film came out. This is the first time George Lucas isn't really directly involved, and so you gotta not do anything too crazy out the gate. So it pleased most fans, and it really inspired hope for the sequel trilogy. I remember being over the moon after I saw this that opening Thursday night. Visually, it might have been the best looking Star Wars film to come out at that time, and we got Han and Chewie back, the score, I mean, everything about this movie. I saw it 3 times in theaters. I ate it up. I was quoting it. I watched it a bunch in 2016, 2015, and in 2017 leading up to The Last Jedi, which we'll talk about in a second. But to this day, it's still a very fun Star Wars movie and easy to toss on. However, I don't go back to it as much because the sequels that would follow kind of tainted my overall thoughts on this movie, unfortunately, because then I'm like, oh, what's next? And then you realize, oh, that's where we're headed. Yeah, I don't even need to waste my time rewatching that one. So still an A-tier movie to me, but could have been so much more had 8 and 9 been better films. Next, we got Andor Season 1. Season 2 comes out in a few months, so I'm only talking about Season 1 in this video. I am going to say that Andor is S-tier Star Wars. I'm going to toss it up there right now. This first season of television, it goes beyond just being a Star Wars show. It's great dramatic television, and it doesn't even feel Star Wars, which I think is for the better in this case. Every episode builds up to sort of a mini finale within an individual arc of episodes, and my favorite by far was the one involving Kino Loy, played by Andy Serkis, and the whole prison break. One Way Out. Chills every time. We get a heist episode here. We get, the uprising in the streets at the end. This is really planting the seeds of the rebellion, and we're learning more about Cassian, getting to know him more, but we're really seeing the Empire as the biggest threat they've ever been in the Star Wars universe. They feel unbeatable and just downright evil in this show, so I'm loving it, and I cannot wait for Season 2. I hope that it's just as good so this can, maintain that level of quality and can still be maybe the best Star Wars thing we've got in post-prequels. Maybe, just maybe. Moving on, we've got The Acolyte, which, honestly, I think is garbage. I'm going to put it in F tier. Now, I don't know what's worse between those two. Kind of flip a coin. They both stink. But I'll put it at the back of F tier just because it was laughably bad. At least there were moments in the Rise of Skywalker where I'm like, oh, that I could see the vision there. Like when we get a Force Ghost Han, essentially, with Kylo, I was like, I can see a vision here. But here I was like, what are we doing? The Acolyte has 2 episodes that are essentially flashbacks. One of them is so horribly acted. I don't even want to talk about it. And then we get that same episode through a different perspective later, but it doesn't really answer much. And everything was kind of predictable. This show was just a mess from the jump, and it tries to change our perception of the Jedi for the worse. It doesn't understand Star Wars to me, and it felt off from the beginning. I will commend it, I guess, for having the occasional cool lightsaber duel, but even then, there's not a lot of emotional weight behind it, so it kind of just feels empty, and this show is a complete mess. I can't recommend it to anyone. Next, we have The Book of Boba Fett, which should have just been a subplot of The Mandalorian Season 3, frankly. I mean, that could have just been The Mandalorian Season 3, because Mando has his own dedicated episode or 2 where Boba just takes a back seat in his own damn show. Really strange. My favorite episode is the one with Luke and Grogu training. We also get Ahsoka in here. So there's like a 2-episode run. I think it's the 5th and 6th episode because there's 7 episodes where I was like, this is amazing. And then it just has kind of a mediocre, dare I say, mid finale. I will still go top of C tier with Book of Boba Fett because to me, those 2 episodes, 5 and 6, were awesome. They're basically just extra episodes to fill the gap between The Mandalorian season 2 and 3. But as an overall body of work, like the first 4 episodes, we're getting flashbacks of Boba and his time with the Tusken Raiders. Nothing's really happening, straight up. And then we get this Mandalorian side plot with like Luke Skywalker showing up, and then boom, everyone meets again at the end for an overlong finale with anticlimactic droids in the streets. It was just very all over the place, so C tier feels appropriate for it. But anyway, next we got The Last Jedi, which I'm going to put in D tier, probably behind Kenobi. I do like this more than The Rise of Skywalker, so I won't put it in outright F tier. And I think that visually you could argue this is the best looking Star Wars movie. I would not hate that point. I just don't care for how this is the project that forever changed the most beloved franchise of all time for me as a kid, my childhood. I mean, everyone, love or hate this movie, you can't deny this changed Star Wars discourse forever. And so I'm always kind of bitter about this movie's existence because it ruined something for most people. Now, I don't think this is the worst movie ever made because The Rise of Skywalker exists and there are some real stinkers, but I've never been this, I guess indecisive, rather, in denial about a movie when the credits rolled. So much so that when I first watched it, I went back the next morning and brought a notepad and wrote out all my thoughts so that I could really understand how I felt about this movie because it was heavy. To quote Back to the Future, it was heavy, Doc. So this movie really made me question my love of Star Wars. It was the first time that, in a major franchise that I loved, I had to question my love of that franchise. And I can't get over the fact that 40 minutes of this movie with Canto Bight, we got space horses, gamblers, a stuttering Benicio del Toro. It was just like, what are we doing? Didn't care for the direction they took Luke's character. I mean, I know people continue to argue about that. Wasn't my cup of tea to see Luke Skywalker in that current state. And I just feel like there was missed opportunity after missed opportunity here. And frankly, Poe and that whole character thing with Holdo frustrated me. And then you got, Flying Leia. I mean, there are just so many things that are wrong with this movie. Broom Kid's kind of the cherry on top of just the movie that ruined Star Wars forever. So yeah, D tier, and I could definitely go F if I was feeling it. Next we have Clone Wars, but just season 7. And this to me is S tier Star Wars. I'm putting it up here right alongside Andor, and honestly, screw it, I'm going to put it at the top of S tier because I've got the Siege of Mandalore here. Maybe the best 4-episode run in, not all of TV, but in Star Wars. It's phenomenal. And if you watch Revenge of the Sith and the Siege of Mandalore kind of side by side, the way that it all weaves together, masterfully done. The Siege of Mandalore gives us Maul versus Ahsoka. We get to see just the aftermath of all that, and Vader makes an appearance at the very, very end of this show. I mean, it's just masterfully crafted, and I'm so happy that we got a final season of Clone Wars because it went through hell. We got the 5 seasons, then we got the 1 season that went to Netflix, and then we got, this season, and it was like, this is a gift to fans. I grew up watching Clone Wars, and so this final season, really well done. There's a couple episodes in there that I didn't care for, like, I forget the 2 characters' names, but with Ahsoka. But then you got the Bad Batch and you got the Siege of Mandalore. And I'm at the point where, like, Siege of Mandalore carries enough weight to be outright S tier. Like, that's how God tier Star Wars it is. Next, we got Visions, which I never even got through. I just put it on here because I wanted to acknowledge it. I would say Visions is, I'll put it like, I guess objectively I have to put it here because I haven't even seen it. But what I did watch, I was like, this isn't my thing. Now, it being at the back of F tier, probably a lot of that has to do with me having not watched it. So I'm just letting you know, it's not like I think it's garbage or anything. I'm just putting it here because I haven't fully seen it. I just wanted to include it on the tier list. But I've never really been able to get into anime that much, and I watched a couple episodes back in the day, and I was like, not my thing. So we'll just put it there. But understand before you go rage comment, it's just here because I didn't add a tier that says haven't seen. Next, we have Solo, a Star Wars story. I actually like Solo more than Rogue One. And I hated Solo when I first saw it in theaters in 2018. I was like, this isn't Harrison Ford. This is bullshit. Why am I watching this? And then 4 years later, I went back and rewatched it. I was like, this is actually fun. It's a heist Star Wars movie. Like, if this was just a Star Wars movie and the main character wasn't Han, it was just any random guy, still played by Alden Ehrenreich, but he's playing just a random dude, I think people would be way more accepting of this movie. It's the fact that it's not Harrison Ford. It's also the fact that it came out only like 5 or 6 months after The Last Jedi, so tensions were high. People were kind of boycotting intentionally. It was horribly marketed. The first ever trailer dropped on Super Bowl Sunday only 3 months before the movie came out. So just, a lot of things added up for this movie to be a disaster. The directing changes behind the scene with Phil Lord and Chris Miller, and then Ron Howard come in, so it was kind of screwed from the jump, honestly, but it is a very fun movie. I'm gonna say B tier. I'm gonna go top of B tier with Solo. And, it's really rewatchable, surprisingly. I don't go to it that much, but it's fast paced and you get a fun heist flick out of it. So yeah, I'm digging Solo. And the last one here I've got is The Bad Batch, which I've never finished. I'm wearing this and I've never finished The Bad Batch. Who am I? I actually got sent this way back when, in 2021, I want to say, or 2020. I think it was 2021. I got a Bad Batch box for season 1, and I watched all of season 1. And then I watched a few episodes of season 2, and I was like, oh, I got it, like, when it was coming out. And then I just fell off with it, and I never got around to season 3. So one day I will binge The Bad Batch and catch up, but today is not that day. From what I've seen, I would probably go C tier with it, probably like top of C tier, because, I like this group. Wrecker's one of my favorites. The route they've taken Crosshair, I find fascinating. And then Hunter's just cool. He's like the Rambo of the group, straight up. So I like the dynamic of the squad, but it isn't terribly memorable when compared to like the best of Star Wars animation, like the best of Rebels or the best of Clone Wars. I think of some episode arcs we got there, and then I look at the Bad Batch and I'm like, of those 3, it's definitely the weakest. Now, I do like some episodes, but I remember like a good chunk of the middle of this season kind of just being filler / throwaway, which is never what you want. So Bad Batch has its moments to shine, the premiere episode especially, and the finale, but a lot of that, the middle meat of the show, frankly forgettable. But yeah, that does it for my Disney era Star Wars tier list of the movies and shows they've put out. Let me know your ranking in the comments down below and hit that like button. Subscribe to that notification bell, and of course, watch my review of Skeleton Crew that I have linked up above somewhere in this video. But I appreciate you guys for watching, and I'll hit you with this instead of my normal outro. You ready? May the Force be with you, always.